welcome to another episode of the Mining Conversation with MsTedy, and this is the Mining Indaba edition. Today I am joined by Vuyisile Ncube, lead corporate campaigner, making clean energy just and equitable at Earthworks. Wonderful. All right, before we start the chat or the conversation, I just want to first thank Minor, which is the sponsor of the podcast, and also thank my team that is not here. They're in Joburg and I'm in Cape Town. That is 20. What's his name? 20. And then there's also Kamu and Kele as well as Tsepo. So with that being said, we'll just continue with the conversation. Have fun and just tell me about you and what you do. So let's start with what is Earthworks?
So Earthworks is an organization that has been supporting frontline communities and indigenous peoples that live near the extraction of transition minerals and the extraction of oil and gas. I am part of the Making Clean Energy Clean initiative, and our goal is to advocate for a just transition, but one that does not negatively impact communities and one that does not repeat the injustices of the fossil fuel era. So I'm the lead corporate campaigner, which means I engage with companies, primarily automakers, about their supply chains and ensuring that throughout their supply chains there's the responsible sourcing of transition minerals and that their supply chains are free from environmental and human rights abuses.
Okay, wonderful. So you coming to the Mining Indaba, and then their theme being future-proofing African mining today. How does that speak to you and your organization?
So what we've seen and what we're noticing is with the transition, there is an increased demand of transition minerals, and our role is to advocate and to make sure that as transition minerals are being mined, they do not negatively impact indigenous peoples. This mining does not violate the rights of indigenous peoples, does not violate the rights of frontline communities, but more importantly, that we start building out infrastructure so that we can have recycling and circularity, so we can reduce demand for new mining.
Okay. So what are the most notable challenges that you've noted within the communities that are within the mining industries?
So there are a range of communities that approach our organization and a range of communities that we support. Some of the issues that we have encountered are indigenous peoples that come to us and have a mine project that is proposed that has potentially been authorized or is just about to be authorized, and this was done without those indigenous peoples giving their free, prior, and informed consent. And they're concerned that the mining project will continue and violate their rights. And the issue that we also see is that with indigenous peoples, they have close ties to the ancestral lands. And so mining projects that are on their ancestral lands generally do violate their ethic, and they were not given the opportunity to engage with mining companies, to give consent, withhold consent, or to give consent with conditions. So that's one example of some of the issues we see. Sometimes we're approached by frontline communities where there is already mining, and in those instances, the communities are living with mines, and they want to know who are the purchasers of these minerals, who are the companies at the other end of these supply chains, and can those companies leverage their influence and speak with these mining companies at our doorstep, so that the mining companies start enacting environmental and human rights policies and uphold their rights as communities, because they're impacted by these operations.
And then when you do this work that you're doing, are mining companies listening to the communities? Are mining companies listening to your organization? Like when you bring forth the challenges that the mining communities are facing, are mining companies willing to have that engagement with you guys, with the community as well?
So usually when indigenous peoples are approaching us, it's because they have mining companies that have not responded to them, or they maybe do not feel comfortable speaking with the mining companies because they are completely opposed to the mining companies. And so in certain situations, or in a lot of situations where I come in, where I engage with companies, these are usually the purchasers of these minerals, so-called companies, that's when we engage car companies that we have relationships with, because we know that in most instances, mining companies are more likely to listen to the purchases of these minerals, car companies. So car companies actually play an important role in leveraging their influence to hold mining companies accountable, to make sure that those operations don't impact the rights of surrounding communities and the environment.
Yeah, and then we know that with, as the mining industry moves forward, all the world is moving forward. There's more introduction of tech, and most companies are now speaking of AI, how AI is helping with extraction of minerals. It's also helping ensuring that the environment is not impacted and people who are within the environment, there's minimal damage that is happening in the environment and people do not get sick. So what do you think has been, or what have you noted with the introduction of technology, and how has it changed the mining industry, and is it really changing the mining industry?
So in terms of the tech that we've seen, and I think what I've noticed is that there's actually a gap and a need for technology in the recycling space.
Okay.
And the reason this is the case is because, for African countries, for example, such as Nigeria and Ghana, they receive a lot of their e-waste from the global north, and often they have to process this e-waste, crush this e-waste, and with minimal or no protections to their health or to their safety. And so in addition to actually building out recycling, we also need policies that make sure that in recycling there are strong health standards that are upheld, there are strong safety standards there that are upheld, but we also need policies to make sure that original equipment manufacturers, so the companies that are producing this technology, when they start building the technology or the batteries or whatever products they're developing, that they start by designing with repairability in mind. So that's one technological advancement we'd like to see. When you're designing a product, make sure that it can be repaired so that consumers can repair it. After, if it can't be repaired, make sure that it's designed so that it can be disassembled easily. And the reason why we need disassembly is so that it can be recycled. And then you can start getting the minerals that are in those products and start recycling it and then putting it back into that life cycle. So that's the type of technological advancement that we'd like to see more of.
Okay.
And these policies, yes, they need to be local, but we actually need an international body that makes it mandatory for these big companies to take responsibility of their products, so that they're the ones that release them into the market, but also collect them, recycle them, and then take those components and material to produce new products.
So with your organization, you do work with other African countries, right? So NGOs as well. What is the difference that you see between South Africa and other? Is there a difference actually, or are we more or less facing the same issues when it comes to the mining industry?
What I would say is similar. Maybe I'll start with the similarities. Some of the similarities I've seen with, let's say, South Africa, the DRC, and a number of African countries, is that there is a severe lack of capacity from government officials to actually monitor compliance with the law. So what you see is you have mining companies, and you have communities that are impacted by mines, but you don't have government officials that are actually monitoring the mining companies and making sure that they're compliant with the laws. There's also an issue of capacity in terms of enforcement. So where you see that there's a mining company that is impacting a community in Mpumalanga or in Kolwezi in the DRC, how are you going to enforce that? How are you going to hold the mining companies liable? So I think the capacity issues are one of the issues that are similar across the areas that we have worked and what we have seen. Maybe some of the differences are related to the actual laws that are on the books. So South Africa has very strong environmental protections. In South Africa, all communities have a right to a healthy environment and an environment that is not harmful to their wealth and their well-being, and this is in our constitution. So South African communities have strong constitutional protections. Our NPRDA, which is our Mineral Petroleum and Resources Development Act, which governs our minerals, also has strong laws that make it a requirement for mining companies to meaningfully engage with communities, make sure that they have social and labor plans that benefit communities. So the laws look good in South Africa, but the issue now is because we don't have the capacity to enforce, it just ends up being the same where communities are having issues with environmental degradation, human rights violations, and forced displacement.
So we have good laws, but the implication,
The enforcement, exactly, and the compliance is the issue. Yes. And this is also from the point of extraction, where there's mining, we have issues, and even at end of life. So when mining companies close off their mines, we have strong laws, but we don't have compliance, which is how you find situations of abandoned mines. And I'm sure in the news right now, the still 15 issue has been very prevalent. That's because in my opinion, we didn't have government officials monitoring the compliance with our laws so that that mine is properly closed, properly rehabilitated, so that you don't have situations of people who are desperate and who are struggling with poverty and unemployment, resorting to in those dangerous situations.
And we have about 6,000 plus abandoned mines.
Exactly, in South Africa. So it's the issue of the abandoned mines. It's also the issue of acid mine drainage. When you have these mines that are not rehabilitated, every time it rains, that process releases, it acidifies the underground water table. So it releases toxins into the water, into the environment, and then obviously there's the issue of surrounding communities that are not fenced or kept away from those unrehabilitated sites.
And then just also another conversation that is currently happening is the clean energy versus coal. Some people are for South Africa moving away from coal. Some people are saying that we have so many coal mines and coal is so big in South Africa, we cannot afford to move away. So what are your thoughts on that argument? Should we just stick to coal or stick to clean energy, or can we collaborate and make both work?
So interestingly, there was this case called the Deadly A case, which was highlighting the issues that Mpumalanga-based communities and families had living there because of the A and how toxic it was. Mpumalanga is the heart of coal production in South Africa. There's coal mining, there are coal-fired power stations, there's Sasol, and those emissions make the air quality very detrimental to families and communities there. And so what I have found is when you speak to communities that live in Mpumalanga that are faced with this, they don't want coal mining.
Okay.
Because it's negatively impacting their housing. A lot of these communities have also experienced, seeing one coal mining company come, mine, disappear, and another one come, mine, disappear, and they're in the same situation where, maybe you didn't benefit from a job, or maybe you had a short-term job but you're still living in poverty. And so during the the president had a panel on climate change and a just transition, and was going around the country, having a roadshow, soliciting, community feedback and community input. And I noticed that, a lot of, or some communities that are at the heart of coal will speak about make us part of this just transition, upskill us, right? Because you have a lot of unrehabilitated mines, 6,000 is the whole world. Upskill us so we can be part of cleaning up these places where we live, where there are abandoned mines. Upskill us so, when you have these projects to rehabilitate, we can be part of that. And even, when it comes to our coal-fired power stations and our engineers that are working there, we could be having a conversation about how to upskill them so that they can start being able to use their skills that are transferable to work within the clean energy space. And so I think as South Africa, we have huge capacity for renewable energy, and instead of waiting until the last minute and then having to rush, I think we should start looking proactively at ways in which we can start transitioning in a way that is just. Because if we think about it, if we're proactive, start upskilling, start involving communities and women, it will be more just than waiting until the last minute.
Wonderful. So I just want you to share your thoughts into how we can make the South African industry better, seeing with the work that you've done, what you see with other countries doing, what can we learn from other countries? What is it that we need to incorporate in South Africa? So what will it take for the South African mining industry to get better? For everyone, mining companies, communities, young people, women, everyone, because at the end of the day, it is contributing. It's one of the biggest contributors of our GDP. So it's one of those things where it's good, it's bad, but it's here, and we just need to make it work for everyone. So yes,
I think it's important that we listen to frontline communities, that we listen to mining impacted communities about what they want and how they see mining in their communities. I think many of your viewers will be aware of the colonial case in the Eastern where you had communities saying, we have the right to take pride in consent, or we don't want this mine on our ancestral lands, we want the right to say no, and that was challenged. And this happens because, in my opinion, mining companies mine, but they enter these communities without having meaningfully engaged, without having ensured that there was that free, prior, and informed consent. And this is something that we've seen across the board. And where you don't have this free, prior, and informed consent, where you're not engaging with communities while in advance of the project, that's when you have the risk of having a project destabilized, stop, taken to court or challenge, because there is no community buy-in. So I think it's important for the mining industry to listen to what communities want, listen to engage communities ahead of time, like prior, give them time, give them the information, and then hear how communities feel about your mining project. Because I think sometimes what happens is, we have the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy that gives a company a mine right, and the mining company just proceeds. Or as part of the mining right application, they are having community conversations, community halls, but that consultation is not meaningful, and communities don't feel like we've been able to actually engage. They feel like this is a box ticking exercise and it's going to happen regardless of what we say, which is how we end up not having buy-in. So I think it's important that mining companies listen to communities. I think it's also important for the DMRE to make sure that the laws that we do have on the books in South Africa, that you are having more officials that have the capacity to monitor that these laws are being upheld, that companies are complying with these laws, and where they're not, you need to enforce that. So I'll give you an example. In South Africa, we say that as a mining company, before you even start mining, you need to set aside money. You need to set aside an amount that you will use at the end to rehabilitate and to build exactly. But because of the history that we have where we don't have monitoring, you end up finding that by the time it's the end of life of the mine, the money isn't enough to rehabilitate. That's if the mining companies, even though sometimes they sell off the asset and they disappear and you've got a smaller mining company. So I think government also has a role to play in increasing the capacity that exists in our country.
And then any last thoughts you would like to share? Closing statement?
I think it's the conversations that we're having on the African continent are different to other conversations that in the global north they're having. We talk about a just transition, we talk about having renewable energy, but the International Energy Agency, predicted, according to their statistics, by 2030 you could have, they estimate, you could have 554 million sub-Saharan Africans who don't have access to electricity. So with us, we also have an issue with energy poverty. Right? Before we even talk about moving from fossil fuels to renewable energy, many communities, rural communities, don't even have electricity. And so I think there are ways that we can think, as Africans, and think, about innovative solutions. Can we maybe leapfrog, right? Instead of building like a coal-fired power station, for example, can we have decentralized renewable energy, solar energy for a community, that isn't maybe attached to the ESCOM grid, but is enough and sufficient for that community? Are there other ideas that are similar that could increase the energy access for rural communities in sub-Saharan Africa that are renewable, so that they don't have to face the impact of having fossil fuel removed, having to inhale the toxic air of coal-fired power stations. So I think there are a lot of challenges that we're facing as Africans, but we have the opportunity to think innovatively about solutions. And I also think just globally, there is a need with this discussion about more mining that is required for transition minerals. There's a need for an international body to pass laws that make it mandatory for all companies to do their due diligence. Because we don't want a situation where resource-rich African countries are being mined, but there is no one who is, providing the oversight to make sure that this mining does not violate the environment and the human rights of communities. Exactly. But you're keeping to the law, so that if you're a company, regardless of where you are from in the world, when you are operating in South Africa or DRC or Nigeria, you still have the obligation to maintain the highest international best practices. And so we need those types of laws that are globally applicable, because sometimes, unfortunately, you do see cherry picking, or you do see companies maybe knowing that in this space, there's not as much compliance monitoring, so I can maybe do something or get away with something that might not be above board because I know that they're not officials. So they're in a space where they self-regulate, basically, and that's an issue. We need international laws that are mandatory.
Thank you so much for having this conversation with me, and I'm sure our listeners, audience will enjoy it. So thank you for taking your time in this busy day just chatting to me.
Thank you very much.
So that was Vuyisile Ncube from Earthworks, and she just took us through the importance of engagement, the importance of government and the mining companies
And free mining.
yes, and the community working together in order to have the best solution for everyone. Thank you. With that being said, let me also thank still my sponsor Menar and also my team, that is Trini, Kamu, Mukele, and Temple. With that being said, thank you and goodbye.